And Mark, always appreciate it. We know it's busy. So specifically on Gonzaga, what's the impact on the league and how does it impact San Diego State? And thanks for hopping on.
Well, it makes it what was going to be a pretty good basketball league into a really, really good basketball league. I mean, that's the biggest thing. And I thought J.D. Wicker had a really good point. He noted that, in power conferences, yeah, they care about basketball, right? And they care about it mostly in March. But the football revenues are so huge in those conferences, 40, 50, 60, 70, $80 million a year per school, compared to what they draw in or pull in basketball. It's so much of the focus is on basketball, is on football, and basketball kind of gets lost in there. And at the level that San Diego State is going to be at with the Pac-12, which will be, maybe the top group of 5 or mid-major conference, the revenues are much closer. And so basketball is relatively speaking, a much bigger deal and a much more of a value proposition. And that's why getting Gonzaga is a big deal for them, because they consider themselves a basketball league just as much as they are a football league.
How big of a win is this for the new Pac-12, especially after everything that happened with the Memphis and Tulane and that whole situation, and then the Mountain West Conference stepping in, and then UNLV staying with the Mountain West? To get Gonzaga, just how big of a win is this for the entire conference, even though it's just basketball?
Well, you talk about winning the press conference. They certainly won the press conference today because it's a flashy ad. And it is basketball, like JD said, it's something they do care about. But at the end of the day, as much as they care about basketball, football still drives the bus, and they need to get an 8th full member that plays football. And the options for that are dwindling. Now, what's important, I think the most important thing about getting Gonzaga is that it allows them to take that next step and go to potential television partners and say, okay, we have Gonzaga. They're locked down. Here's some other teams that we have. What do you think our projected media revenue is? And if we add another school, say this school, say it's the Memphis or someone else, they go back and try to get, what will that do to our valuation? And it's a lot easier to do that now with Gonzaga, a lot easier to maybe go back to an AAC school and entice them to come. Otherwise, there aren't a lot of options out there, real viable options. They might have to get really creative in who they go after, looking for that 8th football member that they need to have inclusion in the CFP.
I'm probably getting ahead of myself, Mark, and Mark Zeigler from the UT with us right now on John and Jim. As we look towards 2026, or I guess March of 2027, would you expect the Pac-12 to keep Las Vegas as its conference tournament market, even without UNLV? And of course, the Pac-12 never previously had UNLV and used Las Vegas. Would you expect Las Vegas, or with the Gonzaga and a San Diego State in the fold, could you see the Seattles and the Los Angeleses pop up in a rotation? How do you see that?
I don't think they've decided that. I've asked some people in the league that, and they've said, look, we've been so focused on expansion and getting our lineup together and TV that they haven't gotten to that far. But I think one of the interesting things to note is that UNLV, as part of the agreement to stay in the Mountain West, and it was really, in the fine print, they agreed to keep the conference tournament at the Thomas and Mack Center, which is obviously on UNLV's campus. And the Mountain West will stay there for the foreseeable future. That opens up T-Mobile Arena and MGM properties for the Pac-12. That's where the Pac-12 tournament used to be. And I know the Big Ten and Big 12 have talked about occasionally coming and having their tournament there. But in those years they're not there, it opens up a really nice arena and a nice spot. Also, Gonzaga has proven that they can bring a ton of fans to Vegas, even though it's a pretty long trip for them. And they've regularly come, maybe just made it part of their annual, vacation time for a lot of fans to come, and they've had a good thing going to New Orleans. So I think I suspect they'll stay in Vegas, but maybe they'll go to Seattle, maybe they'll go to another market and try it out. But Vegas is kind of the tried and true, destination, and I think they may have a shot at getting into a really good arena.
Well, let me ask you this. Would you be surprised if concessions were made similar to the WCC in terms of like the latter format of that tournament for Gonzaga? Like, would you expect if this is an 8 or 10 team league for it to play out like a traditional 8-team quarterfinal, or a 10-team league where 7 plays 10, 8 plays 9 on their way into a quarterfinal?
That's going to be interesting. I think one of the biggest adjustments for Gonzaga, obviously they're making this move for money. That's why everybody makes moves. And they're going to double or triple their annual revenues, which is going to be a huge thing for them, which they'll somehow turn into NIL and keep the program going because they don't have to worry about football. But in terms of the format of the conference tournament, I think the adjustment Gonzaga is going to have to make is to being not the biggest and only dog in the conference. They're not even going to have a seat at the football table. And so they're just going to be a member of a conference, not the member of a conference. And I don't think they're going to have as much power as they used to. They're going to give some of that up, cede some of that for more money than they're making now. And so I don't think that Mark Few is going to be able to waltz in there and say, yeah, I want to buy to the semifinals. And not sure that it necessarily would work because you're going to have a lot of pretty good basketball programs in this conference. And, playing a quarterfinal game against an Oregon State or a Washington State or Boise State isn't going to kill your metrics. And I think that was their big concern. So I would think no, particularly if they get that league up to, 10 or 11 members. I think that you'll see just a normal conference tournament and we'll go from there.
So what's next? I mean, the schools are, kind of limited when you think about it. Sac State's a school out there that just got, I think, 35. Tulane staying in the AAC and UNLV not coming to the Pac-12. Like, where do you think this conference goes next?
Well, the options are limited, and no one from the Mountain West can come. They've signed a granted rights. Short of a full-on merger, which I really don't think is going to happen. I know some people have called for that. I just think too much has been done. There's too much toothpaste out of the tube to put it back in and try that. I think there were, a month ago, there were probably a decent chance in a merger, and now I think those chances have really, really dwindled. So short of that, you're going to have to get creative unless you want to take a less than desirable program into your conference and give them pretty big money. But, I think you look at a program like Texas State. I think both these conferences are sort of fighting over Texas State behind the scenes right now. It used to be Tarleton State. It's between Austin and San Antonio in a really growing area of Texas. And do you look at them and say, all right now they're not much, but in 10 years, there's a lot of investment. They're in Texas. That's a pretty big market, two pretty big markets they sit between. Maybe we could have something there. Maybe Sac State is something like that. There's a couple other ones out there in a similar vein, aren't really good right now, but maybe in 5 or 10 years they could be. I think you almost might have to, if you can't go back to the AAC and attract one of those bigger named established athletic programs, I think you almost have to look at outside the box because the other options really aren't very good.
Mark, when the dust eventually settles on the league, whenever it is, do you think additional non-football members will be a part of the conference or not?
I know JD has been open about this. He said his ideal makeup of the league is 9 football members minimum. So you have an 8-game conference schedule. Everybody plays everybody once. You have 4 non-conference games, very neat and tidy and fair and equitable. And then he'd like to see as a 10th member, a non-football playing school, which is Gonzaga, and they've got it. But he's also said in a few conversations, 10th or 11th. So that may open up the door for another non-football playing program. And then you start looking at schools like Grand Canyon, which is actually just about to join Gonzaga in the WCC next year. So they'll be with him for 1 year, and then Gonzaga will leave, or St. Mary's. But, both of them have their drawbacks. St. Mary's, he plays in a very, very small facility. They're basically a coach. They're not really a program. And if Randy Badman ever leaves, and I think he eventually will, it's hard to imagine that continuing at the level that it has. And I think also NIL is really going to crush them. You just saw it with Aiden Mahaney, their best player, leaving to go to UConn this year. So, I think I think those are still in discussions, but I think right now they're more focused on just getting that football member, 1 or possibly 2 football members, and really solving that piece of the puzzle, and they'll return to basketball after that.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Mark, great reporting. We've enjoyed it. It's an interesting time, as it always is in college athletics. It never stops, and great reporting on it. We'll do it again soon, and thanks for hopping on, all right?
Yeah, no problem. Talk to you guys.
All right. Great stuff. Mark Zeigler from the UT. We'll step aside. Our